I'm trying a new thing where I'm recording the audio separately just to see if I can. Okay, anyhow, good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody here at Dark Star Magick. Good evening, everybody online. My name is Erik Arneson, and tonight we are going to be talking about the Astral Temple and what it is and how to use it, and how to build it. So to start off, I have been studying tarot and the occult since the 80s and doing ceremonial magic pretty regularly for the last 25 years, since about 2000. If you've seen my stuff online, you know that I do a lot of sort of like scholarly and practitioner research and stuff like Renaissance magic and Kabbalah and other stuff. And I run the Arnemancy website, which has a blog and a podcast and some classes and things like that. So if you haven't seen that stuff, you should go check it out. And then down at the bottom of all of these slides in the little footer, there is my Mastodon address. Not a lot of pagan occult magic people are using Mastodon yet. So if you feel like escaping from corporate spyware social media, head on over to Mastodon and check it out. We need more weirdos there. Okay, so today we're going to cover the creation and use of an astral temple. We're going to talk a little bit about the theory behind it, you know, the phantasmal apparatus, which you may have heard me talk about before, how it ties into Kabbalah and astrology and that sort of thing. We're going to talk about a sort of step-by-step way to get started with an astral temple practice, including some visualization techniques, how to use your imagination to build these sorts of things and that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about how that practice can develop over time and how your astral temple can kind of evolve and how you can sort of like populate that sort of imaginal workspace and put it into use, which leads, of course, into like all of the practical applications of an astral temple, which we will also discuss. So to begin with, what is an astral temple? An astral temple is a ritual space that you build in your mind through consistent visualization practices and imaginal practices. And when I define it this way, I want you to keep in mind that I'm not trying to demean any of those words. I don't think that the mind or visualization or imagination are small or unimportant things, but are in fact kind of central to a successful magical practice or any sort of like occult practice. Unlike physical temples, astral temples can be elaborate and gigantic, beyond your physical means, as large and crazy as you wish. They aren't bound by the laws of physics, and they're accessible anywhere you happen to be. We're going to talk about how this practice is kind of like rooted in Renaissance and Kabbalistic magical traditions and their understanding of the imaginal realm. And then also how you can kind of use an astral temple as your spiritual home base, even if you don't have a way to practice your spiritual and magical practices openly or publicly, or if you're traveling or something of that nature. So just to sort of like put this in a little bit of historical context, there's a possibility that something like an astral temple for magical use has some really deep historical roots. We have a few instances in grimoires and like historical texts of magicians using like imaginal structures and imaginal like circles and things like that for practicing their ritual. But we also have a lot of examples of like the memory palace method being used as something more like a magical working space, especially in some of the stuff that we have written down by Renaissance mages, in particular like Giordano Bruno. But we also know that by the 19th century, organizations like the Golden Dawn were incorporating astral temple practices into their work. The nice thing about this is that it kind of implies that the technique transcends specific traditions and can be adapted across magical traditions, from witchcraft to ceremonial magic to whatever the heck you practice, as long as you can, imagine it. We also have in a lot of traditions sort of like imaginal journeying. So like, like inner journeys or spirit vision journeys or vision quests or things like that, all kind of have a technique that has similarities to astral temples and how they work. So astral temples are a useful skill. The building and use of an astral temple is a very useful skill to cultivate, because it allows you to practice your magical stuff anywhere at any time. As you develop the use of it and as you sort of develop your technique, you can do a good number of ritual practices and magical practices without actually having like a physical altar, physical magical tools, things of that nature. Sometimes, for instance, like if you're working with talismans or things like that that are like bound to spirits, you can even develop techniques that you don't have to have physical access to the talisman in order to use the spirit. Astral temples also give you a pretty good level of like privacy and discretion, because when you close your eyes and are meditating under a tree, nobody can tell what you're actually doing on the inside of your mind. It's all you. It's private in there. Astral temple work is also has a lot of techniques and skills that are parallel to a lot of magical work, including like visualization and imaginal stuff, and learning how to trust your inner senses and that sort of thing. So I'm going to talk about a lot of the astral temple stuff from kind of like a Western occult point of view, but if you practice some sort of other form of magic from some other continent or some other part of the world, hopefully you can still sort of like see where I'm getting at and learn how to adapt this to your own practice. But from a Western point of view, and this is where we're going to go back to sort of like the concept of the mind and the imagination and how it kind of fits into the cosmic order of things, and how when we talk about things that happen in our mind or in our imagination, it's not really belittling those things as much as it's talking about them happening in almost like a different layer of reality or a different layer of creation. So I'm going to approach this both from like an astrological and a Kabbalistic point to sort of talk about where this sort of stuff is happening. In astrological magic and looking at sort of like astrological stuff, the moon governs imagination and the subconscious. Subconsciousness a word? Anyhow, it sort of governs the imagination and the subconscious. It's sort of like the layer of the mind that sort of starts to meet the upper realms. And that's kind of why we call it astral. So the astral realm, which means, of the stars, sort of begins with the moon. In astrology, that is like the first layer above the material world. In astrological magic, like classical astrology. In Kabbalah, that is represented or sort of embodied in the ninth Sephira of Yesod, which means foundation. And this is sort of the realm between the material world and the rest of the cosmos, the rest of creation, right? Where things stop being material and start taking place entirely in kind of like a mental experience. We don't have amazing words for what happens up there, but both Western astrology and Kabbalah kind of place the imagination as sort of like the gateway to higher realms, and that's the place where our astral temple, as we begin to build it, exists. And this, I suppose, if you guys have any questions about this stuff, please stop me and ask. I know that it can be a lot to just sort of be like, hey, look, Kabbalah for only one slide, and then we're going on some other stuff. So let's talk about what I really want to talk about in this is like how you can start to develop this. Like it doesn't really matter what the theory is. What really matters is that you can get it to work. If you haven't done so already, the first thing that you need to do in order to start working with kind of like imaginal realms and imaginal stuff is to develop visualization skills. I'm not a huge fan of the term visualization. I feel like it was a term that 20th century magicians came up with so that they weren't talking about their imagination and using their imagination to do stuff. But it's so commonplace now that I'm going to use it. But if you haven't never worked on developing your visualization skills, or if you feel like your visualization skills are weak, learning how to like trust them is kind of important. So, a lot of times what happens is the way you do this is you start with sort of like some light meditation practice where you have a simple object before you. The idea is there a candle, a cup, or a pentacle. You can use an apple. You can use a friggin' pencil or whatever. But you start with sort of like a simple practice where you learn how to look at this object, close your mind, picture it in your mind's eye. I know that this is something that's really difficult for a lot of people. We live in a culture that has stomped out the imagination so much that people don't trust their own imagination, or they sometimes don't think that their imagination can do these things. But so sometimes, especially when you're first starting out, you just kind of have to trust that you're able to remember what a candle looks like, remember what a cup looks like. Like, maybe you can't see it picture perfect, but do you have a sense of object permanence? Do you have a sense of memory? Can you look in the cupboard and know what cup is your favorite coffee cup? And if so, how does that happen? If there is no image of that coffee cup existing in your memory, then there's no way for you to recognize it again, right? So use your memory, use anything in your head that can bring a picture to mind. Some people have to narrate everything in their head and have things described with words, but you start with developing these visualization skills. As it goes along, you kind of progress into multisensory experiences, right? This is something that you probably have experience with if you've done any sort of art of memory practice where images have movement, or they have sound, or they have smell, or something of that nature, where different senses can excite the imagination in different ways. This concept of being able to like see images or understand images without the physical senses is your phantasmal apparatus at work. That is the gateway between your physical conscious experience of the world and your astral experience. And so that's something that's very important to cultivate. And then I feel like I might have put this last one on here just because I wanted another bullet point, but it is always important to keep a journal of your magical experiments. So keep a journal. Write down, especially since if you're not used to visualization practices, it can take a long time to feel comfortable with them. A journal can help you recognize your progress and all that kind of stuff, and you need that. Okay, now we're going to get into a little bit of the crazy stuff. When you start to work with visualization, one of the things that you will work towards is moving yourself into kind of like the visualization space so that you're interacting with the things you're visualizing. This particular quote is from book 12 of the Corpus Hermeticum, and that's like 2,000 years old, but it has this sort of like practice that has been used to help people sort of like move entirely into an astral space. And it's a visualization practice that I'm going to describe to you. And then on the next slide, I'll kind of read it, and you can kind of like go through it a little bit in your head to see if it's something that you're comfortable with or something you can do. But the idea is that you sit, stand, find a comfortable space, get your imagination a little bit revved up, And then you picture yourself growing. Now, maybe not your body, maybe your mental self, if that makes you feel more comfortable, but you grow and you grow and you grow. You grow until the earth like shrinks beneath you and it's just a marble. You grow until the solar system like shrinks inside and is tiny, until the galaxy vanishes in smallness, and you just keep growing and growing and growing until all of the cosmos, the entirety of the material sphere shrinks into like a grain of sand within you. And then you are basically sending your mind into an astral space. I know that I'm saying basic, and I'm not sure it's necessarily a basic practice. This isn't something that will possibly be easy the first time you do it, but maybe it will. But I am going to read the whole quote for you because it's such a great quote. Grow to immeasurable size. Be free from every body. Transcend all time. Become eternity, and thus you will understand God. Suppose nothing to be impossible for yourself. Consider yourself immortal and able to understand everything. All arts, sciences, and the nature of every living creature. Become higher than all heights and lower than all depths. Sense as one within yourself the entire creation. Fire, water, the dry and the moist. Conceive yourself to be in all places at the same time. In earth, in the sea, in heaven, that you are not yet born, that you are within the womb, that you are young, old, dead, that you are beyond death. Conceive all things at once, times, places, actions, qualities, and quantities. Then you can understand God. Now, this particular practice is a big one, right? Like, that's not something that you can just sort of someday be like, oh, yes, I am beyond all things. But the idea is that when you send your mind outward and upward and bigward like that, you are reminding yourself and reminding your practice that that the material world is not where you're operating. You know, the material world is something that is on the inside of all the layers of creation. You know, all of the layers, you know, whether you are a Kabbalist or a astral magician or something like that, the material world isn't where these operations happen. You're working in the imaginal realm. The imaginal realm is where everything is possible, where you are larger than you could ever possibly be, where everything is larger than it could ever possibly be, and where even the things that don't exist really exist, where there's no such thing as unreal. There is imagination. So so we're going to go through now basically the practices. You ascend into the imaginal realm using this kind of like meditation technique of growing beyond the material world. Once you are there, you are then free to build your temple. And there are a lot of different forms that the temple can take. Sometimes this might be really influenced by your own tradition. Sometimes it might be something that begins to be built spontaneously. I've talked to people who have temples that don't even involve them like standing on the ground, but instead they float in space, or they build around themselves as a cube of space, or an image of the cosmos or something of that nature. But basically, you want to start with something that's simple and meaningful to you. This might arise spontaneously. You might get to that spot and be in a place where you're like, oh, this is my temple. I already know what I'm doing here. But you also might need to start building yourself. The important thing is that when you first get started with this practice, don't overcomplicate things. You're just trying to build a foundation. You're just trying to start with something that's like simple and meaningful. You should consider the symbolic correspondences of your particular tradition. Like what is important for your temple? Are there particular deities or entities or symbols that you work with and that are core to your working? Like, this is where they will sort of begin to manifest, or where you should start to place them. But you also need to sort of like establish some boundaries and some entryways, because one of the things that you want to do, you don't want your temple to be so complicated and so vast that you can't get back there easily, right? You want your practice over time to allow you to enter the temple quickly when you need to, because if all of your time is spent trying to get there, then you're not really going to get any use out of it. So you know, sort of like find a place in your temple, no matter how big or how small it is. Find a place that's going to be where you will show up, where you will enter, and how you will sort of like begin your work. But don't close everything up. Allow for a future expansion, because you might want to use your temple for some other stuff, which we will get to in a little bit. Now, as you design your temple, you should draw from the traditions that you work with, or traditions that resonate with you. You should recall that since the temple is entirely imaginal, there's nobody outside your temple who's going to be judging you if you decide to have it look like, I don't know, Disney World or the inside of the DMV or something of that nature. Like, it's the tradition that resonates with you that is going to make it a working space for you, that is going to make it the most important. Think though about like the symbolism of various shapes. Like, are you part of a nature religion that works entirely in like groves that are circular? Are you you know, an esoteric Christian who wants something that looks like a traditional cathedral? Are you a necromancer and you want your astral temple to be some sort of strange astral graveyard? Like, think about like the symbolism of what you're working with and why you want that temple to look in that way. It's your imagination. You're the boss of it. You do with it what you want. Don't keep it drab. You know, remember that colors can be both meaningful and symbolic. Materials can be very meaningful as well. You don't have to pay for fabric, so everything can be made out of silk. Everything can be made out of gold. It's totally up to you. Find things that like really resonate with your tradition. Of course, the last one is function over elaborate decoration. Especially when you are beginning, you do want to keep things simple so that you can come back to them quickly. You know, your temple doesn't need to be built in one session or one day. But as you do work through it, you know, just as with a physical temple, your astral temple needs to be furnished for practical work and for practical use. That means you're going to need to include an altar if you have one, if your tradition uses one. Think about what you'd like it to be. Think about like your dream altar, like the altar that you wish you could fit in your home or your normal ritual space, and how elaborate you would like it to be, or how big you would like it to be. The astral temple is a place to sort of keep that. Ritual tools, you can have elaborate imaginal tools that are much better than the ones that you create in real life or that you use in real life. Think about where light is coming from. Think about places in the temple where you can sit or stand as you are exploring it in your imagination. For instance, if you have a polytheistic tradition, you might have multiple altars to different gods in your astral temple, and you should have those sort of set up, or leave spaces for you to set them up later. In particular, you want to leave space for future expansion, for using the temple as a type of memory palace, so mnemonic devices, things of that nature. But also leave yourself some practicality, because you want this to be an easy thing to use and an easy thing to get back to. So don't overcomplicate it yet. You can do that later, once you get into more complicated stuff. Because as you start to use the temple more and have some more advanced approaches, you will have dedicated spaces for specific types of work, for like divination, for invocation, for types of planetary magic, things like that. You might attach to it outdoor spaces, gardens and groves. Heck, maybe your whole temple is outdoors. That's not for me to say. Maybe there isn't even ground. But leave space for these things to work. Leave doors for you to build onto. I was trying to come up with I came up with the word museum, and it doesn't really fit what I was trying to think of, but sort of like leave space for areas that you kind of build out or connect. For instance, if you're using memory palaces or memory techniques, you can connect them to your astral temple or have them as wings to your astral temple or something of that nature. You can also build different chambers that represent different types of workings, whether they are elementary or planetary or devoted to different deities or something of that nature. You just want to make sure that you aren't restricting yourself. Since this is your imagination, let it be big, let it be spacious, let it be something that you can advance into as you spend more time there. Okay, so let's go down this, some of the steps that we've covered so far. So entering your astral temple or starting your astral temple, the first thing you do is you enter the astral realm. You can use the technique that I discussed earlier about growing and growing and growing until the physical realm shrinks within you. You approach your temple location, or sometimes you just pop up in the middle of your temple, depending on how that works. You construct the sort of form of the temple so that you have sort of like boundaries and limits to it. You establish your sort of like central ritual space, and then to really sort of like cap it all off, end it with a simple dedication ritual. This can be something you plan ahead of time or something you make up on the spot, or even just like a statement of dedication. I do want to say that like probably the very first step that I should have put earlier, that I have as a very late bullet point in my notes over here, is that before you enter the astral realm, you should begin with some sort of relaxation exercise and some light meditation, even just silent sitting, to get yourself in the imaginal mood, I guess. Now, when you access your temple, it's helpful to have sort of like a consistent ritual, a short ritual sequence that signals kind of your transition into the astral. There might be times when you want to do ritual work in your astral temple when you don't have enough time to like sit down and go through a full meditation routine and a full visualization exercise where you send yourself through sort of like the astral growth thing. You just sort of have to be like, okay, I need my temple now. So develop some ritual shortcuts, experiment and work with that. Physical triggers such as hand positions or breathing patterns can be really useful. A doorway visualization, kind of like if any of you have ever done sort of like path working in the Golden Dawn, where you have like a tarot card or something of that nature that you sort of step into. Having something like that can be a very good shortcut into entering an astral temple without all of the preliminary stuff. And it can be you can make a talisman of some sort that you carry with you, a drawing that you can draw out in order to use to enter the astral temple, something of that nature. But consistency and a consistent way of accessing the temple will help build stronger like astral and imaginal forms. So find a consistent practice that you can use to do this access, and it'll help. All right, and then when it's time to exit your astral temple, you have to think about it as like you are leaving the astral realm and returning to the material realm. And this is the sort of thing where you kind of like, at least the way I originally learned to do this, you kind of perform the entrance meditation in reverse, where you're in your astral temple, and then you start to shrink. Everything grows around you. The universe grows around you, and everything grows around you, and you yourself shrink back into the material world. Earth is big and under you again. Your chair is there, the carpet is there, everything is there. And then grounding is kind of like a really important step after this, because if you spend a lot of time sitting in your imagination, you can get a little spacey and out there. So, have a snack, smell something. Smelling something bad can be really good for grounding. Smelling something good can too. Have a glass of water or something with some more flavor to it. Go outside, do anything that kind of like engages the physical senses and sort of reminds you that you are unfortunately trapped in the material world with the rest of us. Wow. But I have found that like if you don't do that grounding thing, you sort of end up being sort of like spacey and weird and distracted. So if you want your temple though to continue to be practical and useful, you do have to sort of like use it regularly. Astral temples, they sort of require kind of like regular visits so that you continue to sort of like stretch and flex your imaginal muscles, so to speak. Astral temples also can kind of like accumulate, this is a horrible term. I don't know why I'm going to use it, but like psychic debris, or sort of like, if you're doing a lot of ritual in there, sometimes you might need to do some sort of ritual cleansing of your astral temple, or do visits to your astral temple while you're not doing like really serious ritual work, just so you can kind of like go and see it and turn it into kind of a place you enjoy. And in addition, you should allow your astral temple to kind of like evolve or change as your practice develops. And this is something that like when you are doing a magical practice for years and years and years, you're going to find little bits and things that you pick up from other traditions and other practices that you sort of like start to integrate into your own stuff. You might, pick up a new deity that you have to work with. You might do things like that. But it's important to remember that your astral temple is kind of like you, right? It's not like when you find one of these new things, you get to erase your past. So keep your astral temple, build on top of it, remodel it, change it, but like allow your temple to grow with your own spiritual development, and it will remain useful and remain something that you can continue to use throughout a long magical practice. Okay, next we're going to talk about some of the uses for a temple. The most obvious, and probably the if you've ever come across this practice before, the thing that you've seen is using it for ritual work. If any of you have been doing magic for way too long, you probably recognize that illustration as the cover of Donald Michael Craig's Modern Magic, which I think is the first place I came across an astral temple practice. So I could be wrong. I don't know. I took a picture of the book, but I didn't look inside it today. So an astral temple allows you, it's ideal for ritual work. It allows you to perform ritual without having your working space, right? Like if you regularly do any sort of magical ritual, divinatory ritual, anything like that, you probably have a space where you feel comfortable. You've got props and tools and implements that help you feel like you're effective. And the astral temple is sort of a way for you to learn how to do these sorts of ritual acts and magical ceremonies and things without having the physical space nor the physical tools. It's also an excellent space for practicing rituals while you are designing them, right? Like going through the motions, learning how to think about how ritual comes together and works together. It allows you to sort of like practice these things before you do them in the physical world. So it can kind of work in both directions. It also gives you a controlled environment for working with spirits or entities if your practice involves that. Your astral temple, once you get it built, it is basically like your own sacred space. And the astral realm in these traditions is typically where spirit contact begins. And if you have control over a space in the astral realm, it gives you a leg up on those practices. So it's really, really good for that. And then, of course, it allows you to do ritual in places where you otherwise would not be able to. For instance, while you're traveling, while you're staying with family who doesn't understand all the weird junk that you do, if you are, in uncomfortable spaces or things like that, you have sort of a ritual sanctuary that you can maintain and use. So this is kind of like the most obvious application of the Astral Temple is ritual work, and in a lot of traditions over the past 150 or so years, this is mainly where you see it. But astral temples are also a great place for divination. If you ever work, for instance, with like spirit scrying or like clairvoyant practices or something like that, an astral temple kind of gives you a little bit of a shortcut in a way, especially as you start working with kind of like lunar spirits or planetary spirits. The astral temple gives you like a place where there can be a meeting ground where those sorts of things can happen. You can also use astral versions of like tarot cards or other sorts of tools. And in fact, I would argue that a lot of pathworking techniques that use like tarot cards or tarot keys as ways of like stepping into like a divinatory practice are already astral. So if you start out in your astral temple, you kind of already have a shortcut. One of the things that I have kind of discovered over the years is that you can use like the art of memory to help enhance divinatory practices that use like image-based systems like tarot or that sort of thing. And those also combine with an astral temple so that your divinatory practice and your like mnemonic divination can like combine in an interesting manner in an astral space. This kind of helps draw connections and meaning out of symbols that you might be using in divination, which does, I feel like, help give you a better like intuitive understanding of how divination works. In addition, as you start to expand your astral temple into a sort of art of memory practice, you can use it to both record and review divinations and readings. And it's, yeah, I ended that sentence very awkwardly with a nice but the gist of it is, if your divination practice involves any sort of either imaginal practice or image-based practice, the astral temple can be used to kind of like enhance and broaden that. Mnemonic systems, the art of memory. This is something I've mentioned this a number of times, and I talked about this a little bit in my last class where I kind of did this in reverse, where I talked about using a memory palace as an astral temple. But instead, what I'm saying here is that you can build an astral temple and then use it as a memory palace or connect a memory palace to it. This sort of connection, I think, is one of the key parts of Renaissance magic, because what you get here is the link between like the imaginal world, the imaginal experience, and how it was kind of believed that that the astral realm or the imaginal realm was more real than the physical realm. Our experience of the physical realm is basically our imaginal self trying to interpret whatever the heck is going on in the real world. And so once you start to actually like do things in there, the memory systems and the mnemonics that you're doing, like they enhance, it enhances your magical practice. But it also gives you the ability to to connect sort of like the images and associations and correspondences of your magical practice with mnemonic systems in a way where they kind of almost just end up being the same thing. I talked in my last class, I talked about using memory palaces to store ritual sequences, right? We have a better understanding of memory when it's oriented spatially than anything else. We're just sort of, we evolved that way as creatures that have to live in a three-dimensional world. So it ends up being like a really excellent place for storing ritual, and having a memory palace that has a sort of like predefined ritual in it attached to your astral temple connects the two in a very powerful way. And then again, the organization of complex magical systems, like that's kind of about how, especially if you're doing Western magic, it's so laden with correspondences and connections. Something like a mnemonic system is perfect for that. Mnemonic systems use the imaginal realm. Astral palaces use the imaginal realm. The connection between them just, it falls into place once you start experimenting with it. One of the things that I have discovered through a little bit of experimentation is that your physical and astral practices can and should complement each other. You can, over time, sort of like anchor your physical working space, like the place where you do most of your magical and devotional work, with your astral temple in a way where you, when you are away from your physical space, you can kind of like be in it from afar using your astral temple. Like if they are linked closely enough together, you can kind of do the same stuff remotely that you can when you're there. Things like talismans or scrying crystals or things of that nature can then kind of like be accessed with your astral temple, which means that you don't necessarily always need to carry talismans with you. But it does mean that you might need to get into your astral temple in order to get those talismans operational, which isn't always super convenient, but it is a practice that you can develop through repetition and ritual and such. In addition, it does mean that like some workings can sort of like begin physically and then continue or complete astrally when you are away from home later. So you can kind of use those in conjunction with each other in interesting ways. All right, so I used a picture of Tetsuo because I used Kaneda earlier. I don't know if you guys have seen Akira, but I really like the end of the Akira movie when like the world kind of shrinks and Kaneda sort of like grasps it in his hand. So I was like, oh, I should use Tetsuo. He was a frustrated dude. He definitely needed some troubleshooting. It's easy for me to talk about the Astral Temple and like the techniques of using it because I've been doing it for so long, but I also know through kind of like leading people through it that there are a lot of difficulties. As I mentioned earlier, we unfortunately live in a time and culture where the imagination has been like stomped on for so many centuries that people tend to not trust their imaginations or tend to diminish or infantilize imagination, you know, dismissing things like, oh, it's just your imagination, or it's only in your imagination. Like we do it constantly. It's part of our culture to make it that imagination is kind of like this foolish thing. And that means that we are all trained from childhood to give up imagination when we reach adulthood, and it makes visualization really, really hard for some people. So I will say that like visualization, if you have difficulty with it, if it's something that you struggle with, it does improve with practice. And the first thing you have to do is you just kind of have to like trust that you can visualize. You know, if you have difficulty like sitting in front of an apple and then closing your eyes and seeing the apple, just trust that some part of your mind is seeing the apple. It's a part that you have been trained to ignore, but it's there. You know what that apple looks like. You totally know if it's a red apple or a green apple, right? And it's not just words. Words are things you learned later. Imagination is how your senses operate. So you just have to like keep practicing. Visualization will improve with practice. That's unfortunately the first element in troubleshooting. It's the most difficult one. But if you've ever done any sort of physical exercise, you know that stuff sucks when you first start out, and it gets easier as you go along. Think of your imagination like a muscle. You just have to keep working at it. Now, inconsistent access is like the problem of like, sometimes you feel like it's easy for you to get into your astral temple, and other times you just feel like you're blocked, like you just can't do it. That can usually be resolved through establishing some really regular routines. I kind of gave some hints earlier on that, like find breathing patterns or physical gestures or things like that you can kind of use as a trigger to help you get in there. A doorway meditation sort of thing to access it can be really helpful, where you have like one particular door or a drawing of a door or even a physical item that you kind of associate with accessing your astral temple. Like those can all help with kind of like building a consistent ability to access your astral temple. I'm gonna sneeze here, possibly. Maybe not. Unwanted entities or energies. This is something that's very, very easy to do, because especially if we aren't well trained in using our imagination, we might get into our astral temple and immediately you might imagine like, I don't know, Daffy Duck or something there. And then Daffy Duck just keeps showing up every time you're in your astral temple, and you're like, I don't want Daffy Duck here. He's ruining my rituals. When that's the case, practice things like banishing rituals, warding rituals, cleansing practices. You can cleanse your astral temple just like you do your normal physical ritual space. You know, I've got a roommate, so I will. Oh, my stupid recording stopped. I knew I should have gotten those cheap batteries. Well, that was an experiment. You can, but you know, like I have a roommate. When I'm doing ritual, I hang a sign on the door that says, you know, I'm meditating. Please don't bother me, no matter how loud my meditation is. So that might, even if it seems weird. Another problem that can happen is your temple can feel like it's just not alive or like nothing's happening. This is something that I think we get from the concept of like photographs or still pictures or things like that. Don't let it be dead. Introduce something that moves. Introduce some wind. Introduce a water feature with flowing water. Introduce noise. Introduce smells. Introduce, I don't know, an animal or something that's moving around all the time. Get some astral temple rats, something like that. What was that? Incense? Yeah, incense is a good one too. Yeah, like, you know, something that moves and changes, and that sort of thing can like help your temple kind of feel like it's come alive or is worth being in. Another thing that happens, especially as you go along, is like conflicting magical systems. You might have multiple altars that you work with. How do you do that in a astral temple? You can do it with multiple rooms. You can even kind of do it with multiple temples. You know, create distinct areas for conflicting systems and kind of keep them apart from each other if you need to. If you don't have a way to integrate them. If you want to sort of expand that practice, you can have different ritual routines for accessing different temples or different parts of your temple. But I think the biggest one, you know, once you get over the visualization practice, I think everything else kind of will come naturally as you start to use the astral temple practice. Okay, so advanced temple work. So if you are a part of a group tradition, there is a very good possibility that your tradition already has some sort of astral temple practice. They might not necessarily call it that, but sometimes multiple practitioners might share access to the same astral temple. You'll see this in some groups online that are doing this sort of thing, where they work together to sort of like create a temple. They'll like describe it together and then all visualize it together and things like that. Another thing you can do is create specialized tools in your astral temple. For instance, scrying mirrors or scrying pawns or things of that nature. Tools that you might not be able to afford in the real world, like, you know, swords made out of gold or things of that nature. You'll find over time that you might end up with entities or guardians who kind of like hang out and help maintain your astral temple. Perhaps if you have a tradition that involves sort of like lodge magic, where there are multiple officers or multiple people doing ritual work with you, you might have like servitors or various guardian entities that kind of like join you in your ritual and live in your astral temple. Another trick that I have found to be very useful is if you are doing work that requires like a certain amount of fasting or preparation that goes on for a long time, you can find ways to use an imaginal space to practice a kind of like time dilation to short circuit that kind of thing. That's kind of an extra advanced technique. But it is easier than fasting for a week. And then, of course, like even if you aren't part of a group that's doing a group astral temple, sometimes you might get invited to something like that, and you can use your astral temple to connect to other astral locations. So those are some of the advanced techniques that you can work on. Although I feel like the memory temple stuff might also be an advanced technique. These are other advanced techniques. All right, so as I mentioned before, this isn't something that I invented. There's a lot of previous stuff that dealt with kind of like astral buildings and astral construction and temples in the mind and things like that. Some of the classical art of memory works are great ways to kind of get introduced to some of this stuff. We are fortunate in that we've got a lot of translations of Giordano Bruno, so looking into his stuff can be really good. Francis Yates' The Art of Memory is really good for understanding historical context. The Golden Dawn has astral temple and pathworking techniques that are worth looking into that might be helpful. And that, of course, has led to modern authors who have talked about visualization magic or visualization techniques, such as Dolores Ashcroft Nowicki. And then you can find online communities, magical communities that have practices that they share around astral temple work, especially like, I've come across a couple of like chaos magic communities that have like communal astral temples that they work on. Even if they don't necessarily use that term, they're still doing the same thing. All right. I feel like this is the first time I've given a talk that was all about like one specific ceremonial magic practice. So I'm looking forward to hearing some feedback on it. But the conclusion slide. So make sure you start simple, but develop a consistent sort of method for accessing your astral temple. It's a progressive practice, right? It's going to develop as your magical path develops. Integrate symbolism and color and meaning from your tradition, from your path, but also don't be afraid to do some personal innovation, because this is an inner practice and no one can see what the heck you're doing. Allow the temple to evolve as you do. Let your evolving practice change the way your temple works and looks. You can, integrating physical and astral work gives really powerful and strong results and can be great for getting started. But over time, I think you'll discover that as you work with the astral temple and use it for more ritual work, use it for mnemonic stuff, use it for spiritual contact, it kind of becomes like a very valuable magical tool and companion that you can use across different eras and stages of your life, no matter what your physical challenges and physical situations are. You'll always have that there as a ritual space that you can use. Magic. So that was the last slide. Thanks, everybody. I would love to hear some questions, comments, criticisms, screaming. I'll put up with some screaming a little bit. Yes, Chris.
Yeah, just interested in getting some feedback, open-end feedback on what about populating your astral temple like proactively with entities, let's say like the familiar. Let's say like I'm building my astral temple and I want to have a familiar as a cat.
Yeah.
I mean, like a talking cat.
Go for it.
And let's say I do that and I'm going to talk to my cat in the astral temple. Like, is the advice that I'm going to get from the cat? I mean, is that what's the word I'm looking for?
Real?
not quite real, but is it warranted that I should be taking advice from something that's in my imagination, in my imaginational space, and that, like, I guess maybe danger is probably the word I'm looking for, and that I'm going to be talking to my familiar and getting self-fulfilling prophecies because that familiar is going to echo something I already believe or something that I want. Like, it's going to tell me, yeah, you should do that thing.
Right, like ChatGPT.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's a really good question, and that's a really valid concern. And that falls into sort of like the question of like spirit contact, right? One of the things that happens as you develop your imagination and as you spend time in an imaginal realm is you start to get a feeling for when something is just your imagination or when something is an external.
Right. I think that's a good point. That's where I was headed. How much of this is my creation, and how much of this is not necessarily like demonic. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, but it's like outside influences. How much can outside influences affect your astral temple?
Okay, so that's a different question, right? Before you were saying, like, is it just me talking to myself, or is it something else? Those are both really important questions. Like in a lot of spirit work traditions, you have sort of like tests, to have the spirit that you're communicating with say certain things or do certain things to prove that they're not evil influences. Another really good way to test, for example, your magical cat is it always agreeing with you? Because if it always agrees with you, it's probably just you. Yeah. Yes.
I was going to ask something similar about inviting deceased animal companions that have passed over into your astral temple. Can you talk about that possibility?
I don't know how much I can say about that. I haven't done that myself, though I do have deceased animal companions who show up in my dreams all the time. I haven't invited them into my astral temple, so I don't know, but you know how your deceased animal companions worked. I think it's important to remember that most animal companions, though we remember them fondly, they were also jerks sometimes. So if your deceased animal companion in your astral temple is only doing, the good cat stuff, that might just be you. Yes, online person.
Online person. You said use physical anchors for astral treatments. Can you elaborate on that or walk through a specific example?
Yeah. What I mean by that is, like, if you already have like an existing physical practice, you already have an altar. Actually, an altar is a great example, right? Like, you have your working altar where you have your magical tools and your statues and your crystal balls or whatever the heck you have on your altar all the time. If you want to have that as a working altar in an astral temple, if you want to do the same kind of work, then you kind of like make a corresponding astral altar. It might be a little fancier, it might be a little cleaner, it might be a little shinier, but it's still, you have like a physical anchor for an astral tool. Another practice that I probably should have had a whole slide about, but I didn't think about it, is I tend to enter my astral temple anytime I'm doing ritual work, even if I'm in my same space. So I'm doing the work in the astral temple and in the physical temple at the same time. That deserves a whole slide, huh? I should have said that. Yes.
I was just going to throw in a comment. It's long been my opinion that as all magic is astral in nature, that the only purpose of the physical temple is to learn the muscle memory necessary so that you can so you can adequately visualize yourself doing these same things in your astral temple.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah, that's why the repetition of banishing rituals ad nauseum to where you're going, why am I doing this? But when you can close your eyes and effectively do a banishing ritual, that's why.
Yeah. Yes.
Is the depth at which you're dropping to your subconscious important when you're working on your astral temple? Like, I feel like if, like I can commune with, astral guides much or at all, like when I'm in a much deeper state. So if I'm like taking a walk or driving for my car, like, is it worth thinking about my astral temple, or should I wait until I'm
I think you want to make sure that you're in a good space where you're not going to like bump into walls or crash into things.
Operate heavy machinery.
Yeah, don't operate heavy machinery while in your astral temple. Yeah, but I mean, that's the sort of warning that I would give anybody who's doing any sort of meditation, right? Like, don't meditate while you're driving. That's a horrible idea. Yes.
It's a good question. Dealing with entities, do you lay out the usual circles in the temple, or do you consider the temple itself a circle?
You lay out the circle. I mean, one of the old practices is that, like, even in the real world, when you can't lay out a circle, you lay out an imaginal circle. So if you're in your temple, you definitely lay out the circle, and your circle can be better than it's ever going to be in the real world, because how many of us can draw a circle? It glows. Yeah, definitely lay out your circles for sure. Yeah. Yes.
Do you ever slip inside or go to your astral temple in your dreams while you're sleeping?
I haven't. But I also might have a more complicated relationship with imaginal buildings than a lot of people, since I've been doing art of memory work for so long. I have lots of buildings that I visit repeatedly in my dreams, but none of them have been my astral temple yet. So that could be, if that happens, it could be really significant, but I haven't had that happen to me.
One more thing. You said a couple names on that further meeting slide.
Yes.
I got was Dolores Ashcroft Nowicki. Could you repeat some of the other?
The other one that I mentioned specifically, Giordano Bruno. And then Francis Yates, who wrote The Art of Memory, which is it's like a history book, but it's pretty good for getting context. Yes.
So would it be necessary to like consciously curate your space after a while? Like in terms of like growth of your astral temple, like eventually would it become an issue of like navigation of that space? Sort of like astral hoarding situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that I mentioned is sort of like upkeep, right? As you visit your astral temple, like, do upkeep on it for sure. Yeah, I think is that kind of what you were asking? Or did I miss
sort
that?
of.
Okay.
Like there's upkeep, but there's also like getting used to like the space being larger, and then getting rid of something, and then like having the space still large and having this empty space within your astral temple.
Well, I don't know. I mean, here's the thing: it's your imagination, so you do have control over it. And I don't. That's a good question. I don't have a good answer for that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I totally understand the question. Perhaps can you ask it in a different way?
Not sure.
Okay.
Let me think about it for a bit.
Okay. All right. Hold on. I got another online question.
Yes. In one of your astrological articles, you talk about Bruno's technique of memory change. Have you tried integrating this with your temples or for fast access?
I don't use memory chains in my astral temple. I just use them for fast access when I'm memorizing things. They're a really, really quick sort of mnemonic device, and astral temples are better suited to like the whole on memory palace technique I've found.
Somebody's just powering off their minds.
Yeah, it's a long ways away. So any more questions have you thought about? Okay. All right. Well, keep thinking about it. You can always email me and ask, and we can talk about it.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you, online people, and
Thank you, Eric.
thank you, everybody. I'm gonna